Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Today is Thursday, August 7th, 2025, and it is time for another session of Let's Talk Power Live. I am Dr. Tanji. We're here, Let's Talk Power Live, where we discuss education through the lens of power. Power is all about making sure that the relationships are sound, the positionality is where it should be, so that students get the excellent education that they deserve. We are talking about this because power is a real thing. Dr. Beverly Tatum says that power is the smog in the air of every relationship. It is a lens, it is a filter. And when we understand who we are and how we came to understand and learn about power, and what are some of the triggers that often become barriers to strong relationships, then we have the opportunity to lean in and disrupt our brain's automatic response. Education is ripe with power imbalances, particularly at the adult and the student level. And by discussing power, we make sure that students don't get caught up in what our adult sensibilities often create. So that's why we talk about power. That's why I talk about power in education. And we come every week and we talk about power in education. So let's get into today's session. Today's session is all about the power to re engage. I cannot believe it. School is in session for some. My niece started her last year of high school this week already. And so school's in session and it's about to be in session. My grandson goes to school in another 2 weeks. So I want to stop and say welcome back to everybody who is either in school right now or on their way. And over the next few weeks of this whole month of August and probably into September, we're going to be doing everybody's going to be going back to school, back to school. You see the advertisements on TV, you see all of the, things in the news. If you get a newspaper, you see coupons and all of those sort of items preparing us for this back to school cycle. And I remember as a student back to school when I'm a little bit older. One of the things I always looked forward to was getting my school list. We didn't get the school list ahead of time. We got the school list on the first day of school. And what my mom, my sister, and I would do is there was a store that we would go to called Corvettes. I grew up going to school. My first early years in school, I was in the Bronx. And we went to a store called Corvettes. And let me tell you, we had the best time. We'd get our list, we would go to Corvettes. And the one thing my sister and I always wanted, we wanted the Crayola crayon box of 64 crayons because it had the sharpener in the back. So, we loved the first day of school and looked forward to the opportunity to get our new clothes because we didn't get new clothes ahead of time. We got new clothes sort of as the school year went on because it was still warm. So we didn't buy my mom and dad, and then my mom didn't buy a bunch of school clothes ahead of time because it was always, kind of warm. But we always had a first day of school outfit. And I remember one of my favorite, and I'm going to try and find it. My mom is great. She has great pictures. I want to try and see if she has it. Me on one of my first days of school. I had cornrows. Both of my aunts were very big into silver bangles at the time. And one of my aunts bought me my silver bangles for the first time and had this great denim outfit. Let me tell you what, you could not tell me I was not sharp on my first day of school. And those are my memories. And I hope that you have fond memories of your first day of school as a student. My first day going back as a teacher, I always remember I used to have these nightmares the first few days before school started that I was somehow going to be late and my students would be standing outside my classroom not knowing if they had a teacher. And I was never late. I was always early. I was always in school, always early, very rarely out of school. But I always remember my first day back as a teacher. Um, I know these last few weeks we've been talking about the summer slide for young people, and then we talked about how adults also have their summer slide. I used to go back in the building several days ahead of our traditional back to school professional learning because I wanted to get the cobwebs out. I realized that I had been having my own summer slide and I wanted to be sure that I was mentally ready for the year coming up. And so that is what my memories are about me being a teacher. I loved the first day of school as a student, and I loved the first day of school as a teacher. And I used to get away from doing all of the let's go over the rules and let's do all those things because I taught older kids, and older kids had been in school for a while. So they didn't need me going over rules all day. So we got right after that teaching on the first day of school. So those are my memories. And I hope that you've got some. And if you're watching right now live, go ahead and put in the comments, I love my first day of school, or share a memory about your first day of school. If you're watching this on replay, go ahead and share some comments about your own first day of school as well. So, who are we? I tell you who I am every week. I am the CEO and the principal consultant of Liaison Educational Partners, where we sit at the intersection of curriculum, instruction, and culture, supporting educational entities at the state, at the district, and school level, and even at the organizational level to make sure every student has access to an educator. And for me, an educator is one who touches a student at every single level. If you are in a district office, a state office, a building office, principal, vice principal, maybe you are part of the custodial staff, maybe you are one of the secretaries, or you are the classroom teacher. You touch a kid and you are an educator. We believe every student deserves an educator equipped with the mindset, the skill set, the tools and resources to ensure they get the excellent education they deserve. That is who we are and what we do. And I always ask you every week, do you have a copy of Understanding Your Instructional Power? This book came out in 2023, and it is a game changer. It helps educators at every level understand that they, one, have power, number two, that they use power, and number three, how to ensure students are not caught up in their misuse. That is not always intentional, but sometimes it is. But how to help educators disrupt the automaticity of power imbalances that often harm children. So, do you have your book? There's a way for you to get it. And I'm also going to give you, there's our website. You can get it on your website right there, on our website rather, right there. And then you can also go ahead and use this book link to get your copy as well. So go ahead, make sure you get your copy. And then people always ask me, well, Dr. Marshall, what actually is instructional power? This is what it is. I'm going to go ahead and blow it up. Instructional power is, and it can be understood as an educator's use of their state, district, and building ascribed job-related authority to afford or constrain a student's access to learning. That's what it is. And that's what we all have, and we all use it. Announcement. I'm so excited. Last year, these two lovely ladies and I, we have been in a partnership, educational partnership together. First of all, we started working on the IES, the International Educator Summit with Ghana ASCD. And we had the wonderful opportunity to share our experiences at South by Southwest last year. And y'all helped us because you voted for us. And we're going to ask you to vote for us again. Please go ahead and vote for our session. The panel picker is open now. It's open from August 5th until the 24th. So please scan that code right there, or go ahead and type in that bit.ly code, and please vote for our session. We are talking about the relationships across educators across the diaspora. And that's really important. So educational leadership, right, in today's political climate is what we're talking about, looking at the intersection of how various educators across the world engage in this idea of educating students. So please vote for us and scan that code. That's how you can get that done. So guess what? You've seen this sign. Schools open, drive carefully. It's in my neighborhood. It's probably going to show up in your neighborhood soon. But like I said over these last few weeks, that summer slide, it is a real thing for students and it's a real thing for adults. And over the last 4 weeks in July, at the end of June and part of July, really began to break down and analyze what it means for an educator, particularly at the classroom level, because at the leader level, your slide is different because you are in the building 12 months out of the year. Traditionally, our educators do have technical time off, right? And in that time, we're not really doing the day in and day out work of being classroom educators. And our minds go in other places. And we experience our own form of a summer slide, right? The disconnection, though, does not mean you don't care. It does not mean you don't care. What it means is it gave you time to rest and it gave you time to reflect. And now it's time for you to re-engage. And we want to do that re-engagement with purpose. And so over the past few weeks, here's what we talked about. In our first week, when we talked about the power to pause and practice, we really broke down what this slide is. And I encourage you to go back and listen to the tape from that if you haven't already done so. I forgot to ask you, have you subscribed to the channel yet? Have you liked it? Have you shared it? Please take a moment, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and please share this content. This is the place where power is becoming operational. I know that there's a lot of conversations about power in other ways, but I make power operational. And so we talked about the slide. We talked about what power moves were, right? That power moves really do matter. And there are a series of power moves that you can take during the time that you're resting and then preparing to come back. And then we talked about planning with power and not pressure. I've been a classroom teacher. I know, and I rode that hamster wheel of getting my lesson plans, sitting down for hours and hours on a Sunday, doing plans. And then I ran into a woman. She taught in a district in New Jersey, and I'm going to say her name. Her name is Maritza. And Maritza had a wonderful way of planning. And what Maritza would do is she would plan every single day. She would reflect on the day, and if what wasn't achieved on that day, she would move to the next day, and on and on and on to the end of the week. And by the end of the week, she was clean, clear, and ready to be set up for the coming week without the pressure. We want us as educators planning with power, not on the hamster wheel of pressure. We know statistically and sort of anecdotally, educators at the classroom level particularly, but at every single level these days, more and more is being added to your plate with less coming off. So the ways in which you can create powerful as opposed to pressure-filled experiences for yourself are going to be the moves that keep you from burning out. And then we talked about this power, pause, and practice in our final week to really set us up for where we're headed now. This right here, powerful joy. You hear a lot of conversations about joy and the importance of joy. Powerful joy is not weakness. Joy is in and of itself a power move. It doesn't mean you're not acknowledging the challenges, the stressors, and sometimes the barriers to educating students at the level you want and the level you know they deserve. But powerful joy gives you the space to say, you know what? I know my why. I came into this profession by choice, and I am going to choose to find the joy the good, the positive. I'm going to look for those teachable moments that help me re-engage, the power to re-engage in this time of helping young people learn. Learning is a complex enterprise. It is not easy. And helping young people learn is not for the faint of heart. And so making the choice to have powerful joy is a power move. And we want you making sure that you are leaning into powerful joy in a meaningful way. Guess who I'm going to focus on now? I'm going to take a moment over the next few weeks to really focus on this group of learners. I remember my own middle school situation, and I will call it a situation. It was an experience. I started the middle school in the middle. I had to transfer schools. We had death in our family, and my dad passed away, so I had to change schools and went to a middle school in the middle of the year. And going to school in the middle of the year is challenging at any grade level. Given the uniqueness of middle school, it was even more challenging. And my personal story is that I went to a middle school in a town where most of the young people had been together since elementary school. Therefore, new people were seen as strangers, and I was not accepted very well. But what's interesting is I was a very good student academically. So my teachers accepted me. They appreciated a student who was committed and ready to learn. I was always prepared, and I was always active, mostly active and participated in class. But my classmates did not accept me because they didn't know me. And my teachers focus on the academics. And so it's very difficult sometimes to have a teacher focus on the academics and not necessarily notice the ways in which students sometimes are being left out. We are much, much better now than our teachers were back then. And it wasn't on purpose. It was this, what Maya Angelou calls is when you know better, you do better. So we are knowing better, and we are doing better with understanding the need for young people to be ingratiated, to have a sense of real, authentic belonging. And the reason why I focus on middle school, one, is for those reasons. And because I taught in middle school and I loved it. I loved everything about middle school. And I wanted middle school for my students to be better than my middle school experience and situation. So I took to middle school like a fish to water. I was deeply involved in trying to understand the psychology of this group. And I chose to focus on middle school over the next few weeks because this particular group often gets left out of the conversation. Yes, everybody is focused on elementary, and early elementary school is really, really important. And of course, high school matters because kids are leaving and we want to make sure they're prepared. But somewhere between fifth grade and ninth grade, kids go someplace. And this is a wonderful time of development. It is hard, it is challenging, it is exciting, and it leaves us a little bit baffled. But it is a fantastic opportunity to anchor some real belief systems and get to the values and help kids stay on track or even get back on track from where they may have been. So that's why I am going to be focusing on middle school, because they need some special attention. And we often hear that middle school students are hard to teach, right? There's a lot going on. So let me tell you what's really going on with middle schoolers. First and foremost, there's a lot of brain development at this time. And what's happening with middle schoolers, this is the second most intensive brain reorganization and brain development since early childhood. Brains are literally rewiring, reorganization. There's also heightened emotional sense. They're on this roller coaster. You feel it, right? The girls and the boys, all middle schoolers are on this emotional roller coaster. Demographically, they're highly diverse. And when I say diverse, I mean in the broadest sense of the word. They are diverse in their opinions. They are diverse in how they want to dress. They are diverse in trying to try on different identities. They are trying on identities day after day to see what fits. That is what it means to be a middle schooler. And then instructionally, they're often underserved. We just kind of, because of the other pieces, the emotional pieces, they don't always get the best instructional support that they need, when this is one of the best times to do it. Because while it is high stakes, it may not be, and is often not, as high stakes as high school. So what's happening? Developmentally, I already said, first things first, the age. They're normally around the age of 11 to 14. Sometimes they're in the 15 age group, depending upon if a child has had to repeat a grade. But primarily, they're between the ages of 11 and 14. And as I just shared, this is the second most significant period of brain development since early childhood. Imagine that. Right? The brain is undergoing huge shifts and actually pruning. And we're going to get to that in a moment. And then their executive functioning skills are developing, right? They're still, sometimes you might ask a student, why did you do that? And they'll tell you they didn't know. And guess what? They're not going to be lying. They're going to be saying, I don't know, because they don't know. And then they are shifting from being concrete thinkers into abstract thinkers, and they're able to reason at a much more complex level. And that's really important to consider, particularly at the instructional level. And so the brain is really rapidly reactivating, and it's rewiring. It is literally rewiring. So there are these synaptic pruning. The brain is pruning out, keeping things that matter and getting rid of things that don't. Think of a tree, right? Think of a gardener. When you go in, if you have plants and you're cutting out leaves, the dead leaves that don't matter, that's the pruning that's going on, right? That their prefrontal cortex is under construction. So they're going to have less impulse control. That's what's going to happen, right? They're going to be willing to take more risks, right? That's what's going on. So because that front of their brain that is logical is under development and constructing itself, they're going to be willing to jump off something, do some things that just do not make sense. And then the amygdala. So because the frontal cortex is developing, the amygdala, which is the keep you alive center of your brain, it's about an almond size, about that big in the back of the brain. That is what's driving the bus. The amygdala is in control. So their emotional responses are going to often override their reasoning. You might say one thing to a young person and they quote unquote fly off the handle. The flight, the fright, or the freeze mode is heightened during this time. And so they're often misreading your body language and your cueing system because they're developing their own. And because, again, that prefrontal cortex is still in development mode. And then from an instructional and an environmental perspective, they are going to crave novelty, autonomy, and peer approval. Their friends have the last say. Their friends matter more. What's happening is they are in this state of becoming an adult, becoming separate from the adults in their lives. So their peers are going to have a bigger role in how they see themselves, how they see the world, And that is why this bullying is really important. That is why the environment at the middle school level is so critical. So, what does this mean as a leader when you're leading for the adult, for the adolescent brain? Couple of things. Number one thing, as a leader in a middle school environment, professional learning is paramount. It is critical that your educators have professional learning about the adolescent brain. As much PD as you provide on content regarding their disciplines is equally as important as you help them learn about the student from a psychological and brain development perspective, right? You got to understand the chaos. You yourself have to understand the chaos that's going on around you and your building, and that it is developmentally appropriate. It's the storm, it's who they are, it's going to be whipped up all the time. You got to design school wide rituals that are going to really build their regulation, help their prefrontal cortex to settle down. And then also, you got to have developmentally appropriate systems. They're in the space between elementary, particularly your sixth graders. They're still going to be fifth graders mentally until about November. So you got to have those systems that are developmentally appropriate for the age group, right? And then you got to help coach your educators for regulation over control. That's critical. The default button is control, particularly when a kid might be quote unquote popping off at you and popping off at your educators. We want management. We don't want control. We want conversation. We don't want confinement, right? That's what we want. And then you got to make space for intentional planning. And it's hard. I understand that. You got to help your educators plan well and plan wisely across the spectrum of their content for discipline and reacting to the brain positioning of the middle school student, realizing where they are, making sure that you're building in novelty that matters, making sure that you're helping them understand their peers and that autonomy, building in autonomy in a real way. And so, what does this mean for the teacher, right? Teaching for the adolescent brain. Don't take their reactions personally. It isn't about you. They're processing loudly, right? Repetition isn't reteaching. The brain needs to hear it. It is the brain anchoring. You've got to reteach. You've got to give them that drip, that cycle, right? That drip, that sprinkle, that flood sequence that helps the brain orient and anchor. You know, over a 4-week period of time, 28 different ways of helping them interact with material to get the brain to anchor. Remember, the brain is reorganizing. It is pruning and shedding. You don't want the brain to shed what they need. So get into that. They do need predictable routines. It helps them build safety, right? And it helps them know what to expect. Really important to do that. Avoid power protecting behavior and language. There is no winning here. When you're power protecting, it is a lose enterprise. The environment suffers and your relationships suffer. So don't get into a power play with your young people. And then they need help with emotional regulation. They don't need punishment. Now, sometimes they're going to have to deal with the consequences of really poor decisions. In those instances, you're not going to have a choice. But if you have a choice between punishment as a default and non-punishment, you want to make sure you don't default into punishment. That will protect your power, your position, your ownership, work environment, and your relationships. Those are the clues that you want to make sure that you're living into. So are they misunderstood? Yeah, I think they're misunderstood. They're not hard to teach. These are high stakes humans in progress, right? These are young people that really do need their environment to acknowledge their complexity. We need adults who believe in their capacity. And then the structures that they give them voice, choice, and purpose by design and intention. That's important. So, how do you get to the structures that give them voice, choice, and purpose? You look at agency as a power move. Agency isn't given, it is designed and it is developed. Because of where they are at this stage, they are exercising agency. We want to help them exercise agency in ways that are productive and that help prepare them for the next stage of their lives, right? Leaders hold the blueprint. As an education leader, meaning the one who leads the building primarily and the classroom, you hold the blueprint to ensure that everybody around you has the same understanding about what agency is. Intentional moves are a must. There has to be what you do and how you do it, right? What we believe and what we plan for must be in alignment. And then operationally, what does it look like by way of action? How do you make it happen? And how do you make it authentic and lasting? One of the ways that we're doing that is offering our building authentic student agency tool. That tool is designed to do a couple of things. Number one, it's going to give you clarity. You're going to move from talking about agency to defining it in your environment. Then you're going to have alignment. You're going to ensure that what you and your learning environment, that you're all on the same page. Then you're going to be able to reflect, right? Reflection, uncover some blind spots. Where are your blind spots? And then you're going to have authentic, actionable insights. And then you will be able to strengthen unity between your beliefs and your actions. That's what you'll get when you take advantage of this tool that we're offering. And if you want the tool, please go ahead and leave me a comment saying, hey, I would like the tool, or you can direct message me and we'll be happy to share this tool with you. And so what does it look like, right? Let's recap what we've done today. Couple of things we've talked about. We sort of paused and went back, looked at what we did over the summer, how we got that. We refocused our time on middle schoolers. They need extra attention. And so we talked about where they are. They're not hard to teach. These are adults that are becoming, and they need special attention. And then we talked about a power move, looking at building agency in a very direct and specific way using our tool. And that we're looking forward to you making sure that you get that tool. You can download that tool. Want to remind you about Instructional Power 101. Let me get that banner up here for you. Instructional Power 101 is available now. It is our on-demand, self-guided learning experience. Learn at your own pace, really tap into how you understand your instructional power. So go ahead and avail yourself of that learning experience as you get ready to get back into school, get the cobwebs out, and get going. And then let's look ahead. Next week, we're going to be delving into middle school even deeper, but that time we're going to be looking at the emotional and the social needs. And I'm announcing probably in September, we're going to be having some guests join us. So we're looking forward to that new dimension of our time together. And remember, please vote for us so that we get the opportunity to really have these cross-continent discussions about education at South by Southwest 2026. Looking forward to having the opportunity to share for that. And always get your book. When you get your book, take a picture of it, put it on your social media, tag us with hashtag instructional power, and then take a picture of it. Lastly, I want to invite you to join us next week for another session of Let's Talk Power Live. In the meantime, subscribe, like, and share. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.